Well, they're not doing the job. NATO has to get together. Europe has to get together and do it. Look, Europe they're my friends, but they're buying oil from Russia. So we can't be expected to be the only ones that are, full bore. But Europe is buying oil from Russia. I don't want them to buy oil.
Energy, war, and geopolitics often collide at the most unpredictable moments. This time, it was President Donald Trump who reignited the debate over sanctions on Russia, tying his willingness to act directly to NATO's behavior. In a post on his Truth Social platform, Trump declared he was ready to do major sanctions on Russia, but only when NATO nations stopped buying Russian oil. His message was more than just a statement, it was a challenge. Trump called Europe's continued reliance on Russian energy shocking, and argued that purchases of oil and gas undermine the West's ability to negotiate with Moscow. He even went a step further, suggesting that NATO countries impose tariffs of 50 to 100% on China, claiming such a move would weaken Beijing's influence over Russia. At a time when Russian drones are flying into NATO airspace and Ukraine pleads for Europe to cut off energy ties, Trump's call highlights the fragile intersection of alliance unity, economic survival, and the struggle to stop a war that has already devastated tens of thousands of lives. Chapter 1. Trump's Challenge. Trump's message to NATO was direct, "I am ready to go when you are." Just say when framed as a letter to allied nations, it carried both urgency and frustration. The former president has repeatedly threatened harsher measures against Russia, but critics note that many of his deadlines and ultimatums have come and gone without significant action. In this case, Trump linked his willingness to act to Europe's energy policies. For him, sanctions must be collective. If the US applies pressure while European nations continue to buy Russian oil, Moscow will still have the revenue it needs to fund its war. Trump's warning was therefore less about America acting alone and more about NATO moving in lockstep. This message taps into a recurring theme in Trump's foreign policy: burden sharing. He has long argued that America should not carry the costs of defense, sanctions, or alliances without reciprocal commitments. Chapter 2. The Energy Question. Europe's dependence on Russian energy has been one of the most controversial aspects of the war in Ukraine. In 2022, around 45% of EU gas imports came from Russia. That figure is expected to fall to 13% this year, thanks to new suppliers, LNG imports, and renewable investments. Yet, for Trump, the reduction is not enough. He argues that any purchase of Russian oil or gas weakens the West's bargaining position. Every euro paid to Moscow, he insists, fuels the Kremlin's war machine. Since 2022, European nations have spent roughly 210 billion euros on Russian energy, according to the Center for Research on Energy and Clean Air. That money, critics argue, helps sustain the invasion of Ukraine. The EU has pledged to phase out Russian energy imports by 2028. But Trump wants NATO, not just the EU, to move faster. Chapter 3. NATO versus the EU. Trump's decision to address NATO, not the EU, was deliberate. The European Union has already legislated its gradual exit from Russian energy, but NATO is broader, including countries like Turkey. Ankara remains one of Russia's most important customers, buying oil at discounted rates while balancing its alliance commitments with its relationship to Moscow. By putting NATO in the spotlight, Trump broadened the pressure beyond Brussels. His message reached countries that have avoided aligning fully with EU sanctions. This makes the challenge more complex. While many NATO states have reduced their purchases, others maintain closer ties with Russia for economic or strategic reasons. Persuading these countries to stop buying Russian oil could be far harder than convincing the EU to continue its phased reduction. Chapter 4. Tariffs on China. In his Truth Social post, Trump proposed a striking idea: NATO nations should impose tariffs of 50 to 100% on China. He claimed this would weaken Beijing's strong control over Russia and force Moscow into concessions. The suggestion reflects Trump's long-standing suspicion of China, which he often portrays as America's chief economic and strategic rival. By tying Chinese tariffs to Russian sanctions, he framed the two issues as interconnected. Yet the practicality of this proposal is questionable. China is one of the world's largest economies and a major trading partner for many NATO states. Tariffs of such magnitude could disrupt global supply chains, raise consumer prices, and trigger retaliation from Beijing. Still, Trump's idea underscores his willingness to use economic tools aggressively, even at the risk of global instability. Chapter 5. Europe's Progress and Limits. Since Russia's full-scale invasion in 2022, Europe has worked hard to reduce its reliance on Moscow. New liquefied natural gas terminals have been built in Germany and other states. Contracts with the US, Qatar, and Norway have diversified supply. Investments in renewable energy have accelerated, yet progress has limits. Energy infrastructure cannot change overnight, and some nations remain deeply tied to Russian imports. Hungary, for example, continues to buy Russian gas, arguing that alternatives are too costly. Even in countries that have cut back, lingering contracts and logistical challenges remain. Trump's demand for a complete halt therefore confronts the reality of slow-moving transitions. Europe may agree in principle, but in practice, the costs are high. Chapter 6. Poland's Warning. Trump's message coincided with a tense moment for NATO. More than a dozen Russian drones entered Polish airspace in what Warsaw described as a deliberate provocation. Poland demanded accountability, while Moscow dismissed the incident as accidental. For Poland, the drone incursion was proof that Russia is willing to test NATO's resolve. For Trump, it was evidence that Europe must take a harder stance, not only militarily but also economically. By tying sanctions to NATO's energy purchases, he framed economic action as part of collective defense. The incident highlighted the risks of escalation. If Russian drones cross NATO borders, the alliance faces pressure to respond. Economic unity could become as important as military readiness. Chapter 7. Zelensky's Plea. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky has long urged European nations to cut off Russian energy imports. In an interview with ABC News, he said, "We have to stop buying any kind of energy from Russia, and by the way, anything, any deals with Russia. We can't have any deals if we want to stop them." For Zelensky, the logic is simple. Money paid to Russia equals more weapons fired at Ukraine. His plea echoes Trump's frustration, though framed from the perspective of a nation under attack. European leaders sympathize but face political realities. Voters are already grappling with high energy prices and inflation. Cutting off Russian oil completely would mean short-term pain, even if it promises long-term security. Chapter 8. Trump's history with sanctions. This is not the first time Trump has threatened tougher sanctions on Russia. Earlier in September, after Moscow launched its heaviest bombardment of Ukraine since the war began, he suggested a second phase of punishment. Asked by reporters if he was ready, Trump replied, "Yeah, I am," though he offered no details. Critics argue that Trump often uses sanctions as rhetorical tools rather than policy levers. He has made bold announcements before, but follow-through has been inconsistent. Supporters counter that his unpredictability keeps adversaries off balance and creates leverage. The debate raises questions about whether his latest threat will materialize, or whether it is another bargaining tactic. Chapter 9. The Economics of Sanctions. Sanctions are designed to weaken Russia's ability to wage war by limiting its revenue and access to technology. But they also carry risks. Oil markets are global, and cutting off Russian supplies could raise prices everywhere. That would hurt European consumers and American voters alike. Russia has adapted by selling discounted oil to China, India, and other buyers. Even if NATO halts purchases, Moscow may find alternative markets. Sanctions can reduce profits but rarely eliminate them. Trump's proposal to combine Russian sanctions with Chinese tariffs introduces further uncertainty. The economic impact could ripple worldwide, from supply chains to inflation rates. Sanctions are powerful, but they are also blunt instruments with unpredictable outcomes. Chapter 10: NATO's military moves. Even as economic debates unfold, NATO is taking military steps to reinforce its eastern flank. Denmark, France, and Germany have announced new deployments to bolster defenses in response to Russian provocations. Troops, aircraft, and air defense systems are moving closer to the alliance's borders with Russia and Belarus. These actions highlight the dual nature of NATO's strategy. Deterrence is not only military but also economic. Sanctions and tariffs are meant to weaken Russia financially, while troop movements demonstrate readiness on the ground. Trump's call to link the two underscores how economics and security are increasingly inseparable. Chapter 11: The Road Ahead. The future of sanctions against Russia remains uncertain. Europe has pledged to phase out Russian energy by 2028, but Trump wants faster action. NATO unity is strong on defense but more fragile on economics. Some countries are ready to cut ties completely, others hesitate. Meanwhile, Russia shows no signs of backing down. Its ability to find new markets, its resilience under pressure, and its willingness to escalate militarily complicate Western strategies. For NATO, the challenge is maintaining unity under strain. For Trump, the test is turning bold words into sustained policy. Sanctions are not just about punishing an adversary, they are about forging unity among allies. Trump's message to NATO highlights the tension between ideals and realities, between long-term strategy and short-term costs. The question is whether NATO nations are willing to endure economic pain to increase pressure on Moscow, and whether Trump himself will follow through if they do. Trump's declaration that he is ready to sanction Russia if NATO nations stop buying oil adds a new twist to an already complex conflict. The stakes are high: unity among allies, global energy stability, and the course of the war in Ukraine all hang in the balance. What do you think? Should NATO nations move faster to cut off Russian oil, even if it means higher costs at home? And will Trump's tough words finally translate into decisive action? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more deep dive documentaries into the stories shaping our world.